The official report of the German Alpine Federation for May 1999 contains a brief line that almost no one noticed. Müller-Johann, Germany, private expedition, disappeared under unknown circumstances. Camp 2, south slope of Everest, Nepal. No details, no press conference, not a single mention in the international news. At the time, attention was focused on a larger tragedy, an avalanche that claimed the lives of 8 people in the area of Camp 4. Against this backdrop, the disappearance of one climber from a private group did not cause much of a stir. But behind this line lay a story that has since haunted both those who knew Johann and those who investigate disappearances in high-altitude areas. Johann Müller, 31, was from Munich. He worked for a travel company that organized climbs in the Alps, was a certified mountain guide, and had participated in numerous expeditions to South America and the Himalayas. His colleagues described him as disciplined, physically resilient, and extremely cautious. According to his teammates' recollections, he was far from the romanticized image of a mountaineer. He did not seek fame, keep diaries, or publish photographs. He climbed, technically cautiously without taking unnecessary risks. In early May 1999, Johann joined a private group of 4 people, planning to climb the standard route from the south side via the South Col. The group was accompanied by 2 Sherpas, one of whom was an experienced guide named Tenzing Lamba. The expedition was not affiliated with a large organization, but had the permission and support of a logistics agency in Kathmandu. By May 8th, the group had reached base camp, and by May 14th, they had successfully passed Camp Y. 2 days later, they were already in the area of Camp 2, at an altitude of about 21,000 feet above sea level. The weather during that period was unstable. The daytime sun was quickly replaced by nighttime squalls, and the wind picked up after sunset. The forecast indicated worsening conditions over the next 3 days, and the group leader, American Joe Ramsey, suggested taking a day off. Everyone agreed. The tents were set up, taking into account the terrain and winds, in a chain perpendicular to the edge of the slope. Johann, for some unknown reason, set up his tent a little to the side, about 30 meters from the leading group, at the base of a stone ledge. This detail would later become crucial. On the evening of May 16th, all 6 gathered in the standard tent for dinner. According to Ramsey, Johann felt fine and did not complain of a headache or any signs of altitude sickness. He ate dinner, joked around, and left at around 9 p.m. local time. No one saw him again. On the morning of the 17th, when the Sherpas began preparing breakfast, it became clear that Johann had not appeared. Considering that sometimes participants sleep longer, no one immediately sounded the alarm. But half an hour later, one of the Sherpas, passing by his tent, noticed that it was partially open. The awning on one side was torn. Suspicious. The zipper remained closed as if someone had broken out without opening the entrance. Inside the tent, they found all his equipment, his sleeping bag unpacked, his backpack, first aid kit, food supplies, and oxygen tank. His boots were at the entrance, as they should be. There was no sign that he was going to leave. Even his headlamp was down, by the head of the bed. No traces indicated that he had been packing or was alarmed. Everything looked as if the man had disappeared. At first, they decided that he might have gone out at night to relieve himself and got lost. Such things happened, but at the bottom of the slope, in the area up to the nearest crevasse, there were no traces or signs of a fall. There had been no avalanche. The snow hadn't changed since the evening. There were no fresh tracks, and only in the evening of the same day did one of the Sherpas, Tenzing, approach Ramsey with a confession. He said he had heard a strange sound during the night. It sounded like someone had cried out, a muffled, short cry. Then there was the sound of snow crunching beneath their feet. He looked out of his tent and, according to him, saw a dark, massive figure in the moonlight on the slope, moving up from the camp, not down, and there was something on its shoulder. As he put it, like a person, but hanging. He was afraid to speak up earlier, fearing that no one would believe him. This story is confusing. Ramsay did not officially record the Sherpa's words. He limited himself to a formal entry in the log, possible departure of a participant from the camp at night. Circumstances unknown. Over the next 3 days, the group combed the slope. As far as the weather allowed, it was getting worse by the hour. They were unable to call a helicopter. The instruments did not detect the beacon. No clothes, no blood, no objects, just disappearance. It was at this point that the Sherpas began to talk. The senior porter from another group located lower down the slope said that he had heard stories about Migo before. A creature resembling a huge man, covered in thick fur, with a monkey-like face and eyes that glow in the dark. Migo dislikes the smell of metal, avoids groups, but sometimes attacks if a person is alone, especially if that person has violated their boundary. None of the climbers took this seriously, but Johann's tent was closest to the stone wall. It was slightly off the route. And that is a fact. Johann Müller disappeared during the night. He was not seen dead. He was not found. But one person claims to have seen something carrying him away, up the mountain. Not down, as avalanches do, not along the trail, but to a place where there are no routes, where there are no people, where the territory begins that even Sherpas do not tread. On the 4th day after Johann Müller's disappearance, when the group was already preparing to descend to Camp Sharptering, one of the communications officers of the Nepalese Rescue Service approached Ramsay. He arrived with a group of porters and reported that no official request for search and rescue operations had been received from the expedition. Ramsay explained that weather conditions had prevented radio contact with base camp, and at that point, there was no reason to consider the incident as requiring immediate intervention. This was only half true. In reality, he did not want to involve outside organizations in the situation. However, according to protocol, they were obliged to pass the information on to Kathmandu. Early in the morning of May 20th, when the clouds cleared, a helicopter flew to Camp 2. The pilot circled the slope twice and took photographs of the presumed search area. The photos taken later showed no signs of human presence, no objects, no fabric, no disturbance of the snow cover. It was as if there were no traces left at all. A spokesperson for the Nepalese Ministry of Tourism later called the disappearance a tragic but not unique case. Indeed, dozens of climbers have disappeared on Everest in recent decades, and many bodies have never been found. But it was this particular case that became the subject of discussion among the Sherpas, not because of his status or Müller's nationality, but because of the manner of his disappearance. A Sherpa named Nyawang, who was working on another expedition and camped in the Khumbu Icefall area, said he had heard a similar story from his father. It was in 1972. One of the porters in a British group disappeared during the night. His companion swore that he saw a figure taller than a man carrying the body deep into the glacier, to a place where neither man nor beast ever set foot. At the time, no one recorded this story, considering it a hallucination caused by altitude sickness. But Ngawang remembered the details were the same. The tent was torn, the zipper was closed, and the equipment was untouched. Some Sherpas began to say that the place where Müller's tent stood was Moba Tsampa, which in their language means the border of the sacred. This is not marked on maps. It is local knowledge. An invisible line that has been avoided since ancient times. No one pitches tents near certain cracked rocks, and no one spends the night under overhanging rock arches. That is where Johann stood. The expedition organizers suppressed these conversations, but rumors spread among the Sherpas in private discussions. One young guide even refused to make the next ascent, explaining that Someone has returned to Everest, that it is not spirits or superstition, it is flesh and blood. Only it does not live like a human being. It does not move when people are watching. And it does not attack if others are nearby. But if you are alone, you are the target. Meanwhile, Ramsey tried to reconstruct the chronology. Based on weather reports, Sherpa testimonies, and visual landmarks, he determined that the last activity in the area of Mueller's tent was recorded at around 11 p.m. local time. Then, according to him, Tenzing heard a sound, not a cry, but something like a suppressed exhalation and the crunch of snow. He looked out and saw a silhouette, massive, inhuman. According to him, its shoulders were like a bear's, but its height was at least 2.5 meters. In the moonlight, the body appeared dark, almost shapeless. The creature walked quickly but silently. It did not look back. It knew where it was going. He did not wake the others. Not because he was afraid of ridicule, as Ramsey later said, but because, as he later admitted in a private conversation, if I had made a sound, it would have turned around. These words proved crucial for those engaged in unofficial analyses of such disappearances, in particular for a researcher named George Gale, who, years later, compiled a dossier on dozens of cases of missing climbers in the Himalayas. He noted that some of them had one recurring detail: a complete lack of traces of the climber, but the presence of indirect evidence, torn tents, noises at night, a feeling of someone else's presence. In early June, Ramsey's group officially ended the climb. After discussions with logisticians, it was decided not to continue the search. In the final report submitted to the Ministry of Tourism and the German Federation, the reason for the disappearance was stated as probable separation from the camp at night and falling into a crevasse. But those who were on the expedition knew that there were no crevasses nearby. Johann's parents received a letter expressing condolences and informing them that their son had been declared missing. Nobody, no remains, no belongings, nothing was handed over. They did not give any interviews. The only thing Johann's mother said in a letter to a friend was, "I feel that he is not dead. I feel that he is somewhere, but not with us." That summer, a Japanese group was climbing the same route. One of the climbers, Akira Noda, took a photo at sunrise from an altitude of 22,000 feet. In the lower right corner, a black spot resembling a person standing on a ledge is visible, but the figure is disproportionate. The legs are too short, the shoulders too broad. There's no sign of clothing or equipment, only a shadow on the rock. This photograph was never officially examined. Noda only showed it to his friend, who later uploaded the image to a private mountaineering forum. No one explained in the comments below the photo. One user wrote, "He's back there. They always come back there." A few months after Johann Müller's disappearance, in the fall of 1999, a closed conference of climbers and employees of Nepalese travel agencies involved in Everest expeditions was held in Kathmandu. The official purpose was to discuss safety and emergency evacuation protocols. Still, unofficially, according to eyewitnesses, several incidents related to disappearances and strange occurrences at altitudes above 20,000 feet were discussed behind the scenes. Johann's story became one of the most disturbing topics. One representative of the logistics company serving the private group said that over the past 2 years, they had recorded at least 3 cases where Sherpas refused to go to specific areas on the route, explaining this with bad spirits. Officially, they were replaced and no fuss was made. But in private conversations, it was not spirits that were discussed. They described something physical, a silhouette, a smell, a sound. One fact that emerged in early October was particularly alarming. In the area between camps 2 and 3, at an altitude of just under 22,000 feet, climbers from the Polish expedition found scraps of fabric similar to tent material. The fabric was faded but still retained its shape. According to one of the Poles, it was torn in 3 places as if by claws. They did not attach much importance to it and left it there. Only later, after hearing about the story with Johann, did one of the participants contact the Nepalese rescue service and pass on the coordinates. They coincided with the sector where Miller's tent was located. In November of the same year, when the route was closed for the season due to the approaching winter, a film crew from a Japanese television channel arrived in the region, planning to shoot a documentary about disappearances on Everest. They requested permission to climb to Camp 2 and get comments from the Sherpas who had participated in the spring expedition. Permission was granted, but once there, complications arose. Tenzing, the Sherpa who claimed to have seen the creature, refused to speak on camera. In a private conversation with one of the journalists, he said only one thing: "You don't understand." Johann is not the first, and he's not the last. He was just the only one. The journalist spent 2 days at an altitude of 20,000 feet, gathering visual material. During one of the nighttime drone flights, filmed with an infrared camera, an anomaly was recorded. In a remote area, in the zone between 2 rock ledges, the camera recorded a heat signature that did not correspond to an animal. The object was vertical and massive, but disappeared from view after 2 seconds of filming. The material was not published later. The producers decided that the quality of the footage was too poor, and the story was unconfirmed. However, the fragment ended up in the channel's closed archive, where it was accidentally discovered years later by a researcher named Lars Wagner. He was involved in analyzing unexplained cases in high-altitude areas. He was the first to compare Johann's disappearance with similar events in the Makalu region in 1988 and Cho Oyu in 1992. In both cases, a lone climber, a remote tent, a sudden disappearance, no traces. He wrote, "At an altitude where no predator can survive and where a person without oxygen loses consciousness in a matter of minutes, there can be nothing that is physically capable of carrying the body of an adult human. But someone is doing it, and doing it regularly." In winter, when Everest was officially closed, a private ceremony was held in one of the monasteries in the Khumbu region. It was conducted by lamas at the request of the village elders of Namche Bazaar. The reason was to purify the route from unnatural presence. It was not a tourist ritual. It was a real ritual, with a night climb to the foot of the glacier. There they left something, probably a symbolic object or offering. No one is revealing any details, but immediately after that, a group of local Sherpas signed a collective refusal to participate in climbs in the spring of 2000 if the route passed through that sector again. In the spring of 2000, the route was indeed changed slightly, but the official reason was instability of the snow cornice. In fact, as one of the guides later said, it was done to bypass that damn rock where the Germans' tent stood, and now something that almost no one has spoken about publicly. In June of that year, after the snow melted in one of the side couloirs, rescuers found a bone, a single bone, a tibia, with remnants of fabric similar to the lining of mountain pants. No analysis was conducted. No one requested an examination. The bone was buried. Officially, it was not linked to any disappearance, but the coordinates of the point coincided with the direction in which, according to Tenzing, the creature had carried Johann away, up through the couloir, where people do not go. This case was never documented, but it was the last straw for those who already knew there was something else up there. The Johann Müller case was officially closed in February 2001. According to the documents, it was an accident in the mountains. No suspicions, no investigation, no repeat expeditions. but in private circles of climbers, especially among Sherpas, his name became a symbol of warning. Since then, those who climb to Camp 2 almost always pass by a stone ledge. It is unremarkable, just a rock protruding slightly from the icy slope, but no one pitches a tent there, no one takes photos, and some still leave small pieces of cloth at its foot as a sign of respect or fear. In 2003, a closed seminar was held in Nepal, attended by guides, expedition leaders, and senior Sherpas. One of the topics was issues of undocumented risks and interaction with local beliefs. The official text does not mention the incident with Mueller. Still, one of the working protocols contains the following note. Special sections of the route should be taken into account not only from the point of view of technical safety, but also based on cultural and historical risk factors. This diplomatic language concealed the reality. At high altitudes, things sometimes happen that cannot be explained rationally, and the scariest thing is not that it defies logic, but that it occurs repeatedly. In the summer of 2005, a group of New Zealand climbers took the same route in the same area of Camp 2. One of the participants, Thomas Gray, set up his tent at the edge of the site, a little closer to the rock. He didn't know about Johan. He hadn't heard of the border or the Moba Tsampa. In the morning, he was there, but his tent was torn. Inside, it was a mess. His clothes were scattered, and his sleeping bag was ripped open. Thomas himself was alive, but suffering from severe stress disorder. He couldn't speak. Only a week later, in Kathmandu, was he able to say a few words. He woke up to someone pulling him out by his feet, not jerkily but confidently, calmly. He tried to scream, but couldn't. He remembers only one fragment, a huge hand as if covered with fur with long fingers. He hit something at the entrance to the tent and lost consciousness. When he woke up, he was alone. His companion, who had heard nothing, was lying nearby. The tent was taken away for examination. Traces were found at the point of rupture, not claws, not a knife. It appeared to be a compression, with the fabric torn outward. A report was written, but the official conclusion was the same: damage caused by a gust of wind and careless handling of equipment. Everything else was the result of stress and fatigue. Since then, climbers rarely discuss the disappearance of Johan. It has become taboo. However, among the Sherpas, Mueller's name is still spoken in hushed tones, not out of fear, but out of respect and understanding. They say that in the high mountains, there are forces that cannot tolerate loneliness, that watch, that wait, and they choose those who stray. Johan Mueller did not leave the camp voluntarily. An avalanche did not sweep him away. He did not fall. He did not go for a walk. Someone took him away. And that someone is still there. No investigation committee, no search, nobody, no traces. Only one person saw in the moonlight a shadow with a man on its shoulder walking away. Not along the route, not where they are looking, but where no one goes, and from where no one returns. The reports still say, missing under unknown circumstances. However, those who were there know that the circumstances were well known. It's just that no one dared to write them down.